Hey, what's up everybody? Unrested back here again today, and I'm back with a JFAQ today concerning kind of an interesting subject that's been talked quite a bit about online as a recent, I guess, internet meme or an internet subject or an internet movement concerning Japan and a particular social movement in Japan, and also concerning the decline in population in Japan, and that is the herbivore man. And I'm also going to talk about the carnivore man too, which is less spoken about and I think in some circles not even known about, even though they are speaking about the herbivore. Well, first of all, let's even get into a definition of what this is, because I'm not going to just start this assuming everybody knows. And if you're new to my channel and don't know what JFAQ is, it's Japan's Frequently Asked Questions. I analyze and talk about anything and everything here in the wonderful world of Japan, where I've lived for 9 years. So, I'm also going to give you today kind of a Western perspective and a perspective of someone who's actually lived in Japan, spoken to Japanese men, spoken in Japanese to Japanese men, and talked to them about this subject before and their own dating likes, dislikes, look for a mate, and future of what they see for themselves as far as marriage, relationships, etc. Because I think even one of the most famous people who wrote a paper on this, Masahiro Morioka, who is a philosopher who wrote a whole write-up on this, kind of helped define the herbivore man. I think there's even an aspect he's not seeing, and that's because he's probably not in the dating loop right now. He comes from an older generation of Japanese male, and I'm not saying I have more insight than him. I'm sure obviously there's a lot more he culturally knows about growing from the time of a young child into a man in Japan that I know nothing about. I mean, I have kids of my own that I'm watching grow up now, but there's still a lot that I need to learn, and I'm learning it every day. But nonetheless, I still, that doesn't forbid me from giving my own analysis, my own shiny 2 cents. So, first of all, definition: herbivore man are, as known in Japanese, the shoku danshi. Sho, it comes from the word shokubutsu, which means plant. Shoku, just the single word itself, if we're looking at the correct kanji, which shoku and shokubutsu, shoku. Shokubutsu is plant, shoku is actually meal. Totally different kanji. Same pronunciation, same kana pronunciation, same phonetically the same. But they are two very different things if you look at the kanji. Oftentimes a situation in Japanese where you have two words that sound very similar but have totally different meanings because of the kanji associated with the word. Danshi just means man, it could mean young man, really. I think danshi is a better definition for young man. And the carnivore man, which is niku shoku danshi, niku, meat, any kind of meat, and shoku, once again, meal. Danshi, once again, man, young man, whatever you want to go with, whatever you feel most comfortable with. It could be argued. Some people have called it the grass-eating man or the flesh-eating man. That's fine. You can argue that. I mean, I'm going with literal translations. So I want to get into what is the definition of these. So the herbivore man is seen as a culturally new thing in Japan, as a man who's not aggressively seeking an intimate relationship with a female or to pursue her foremost in a sexual manner, hitting on her in a strong aggressive manner. It's more so seen as, first and foremost, the guy is concerned with, number one, grooming themselves in a way that not necessarily makes them overly handsome or attractive, but just well groomed for the female or females that they wish to converse with. And I say converse because usually they're not looking to aggressively go after them in any intimate way. They are first and foremost looking to commit to a conversation that begins a dialogue that allows them to both learn about each other. And I don't see anything wrong with this. I'm not attacking this by any way. I'm just giving a very objective view of what I have studied and read as the definition of these two types. Now, the carnivore man is the complete opposite. He is known more as the seeker of flesh, or the flesh relations, as it so literally translates in Japanese. Intimate relationships, if you look at the kanji and stuff, it pretty much comes into like flesh relation. They more aggressively seek this out. A sexual connection is usually the first type of connection that type of man is looking for. And the biggest problem I see with this breakdown of the carnivore man and the herbivore man is many times when people talk about both of these things, they talk about it like it's black and white. Like either you are a herbivore man or you are the carnivore man. They often don't talk about that very gray area in between. There's so many different subcategories of these type of people within Japan, and these type of herbivore and carnivore personalities or pursuits of women via men, to start a relationship, have existed long time ago in Western culture. They were just never given this title, and they were never separated. They were just all these different gray areas of what could be measured as carnivore and herbivore by these now created definitions, but have always existed. And the only reason we're starting to see these now in Japan, and this is completely based on my theory because there actually is no empirical evidence to back up all the amount or percentage of people identifying as herbivore or carnivore men, even by the people who have written the official books and studies on this stuff. They don't have actual empirical evidence to bring forward, so I guess that makes my analysis just as legit. I guess, okay, my analysis is legit in the sense of a first-hand basis of meeting, talking, conversing, and speaking in Japanese to Japanese men in their youth or in the dating scene. When I first arrived in Japan, I was 27 years old, very much into the dating scene. Pursued females myself, of course, like any normal, natural man does. Not that there's anything wrong or unnatural about a man who doesn't. There may be times or reasons or circumstances in which they don't wish to, don't feel a need to, or just completely call it off with, for example, what I've talked about recently with the MGTOW. I understand. I'm not dissing that at all. I'm just saying I don't want to generalize men. I don't want to generalize women. And I think that's kind of what's been done here with herbivore and carnivores. There's been a lot of generalization. And why it has always existed in Western is because we just didn't even have these definitions. We just had this different span of what was the herbivore man and the carnivore man, and we've had everything in between, and they've always existed. And the reason for this being is because of a thing called omiai. Now, omiai in Japan is the word for arranged marriage. When's the last time you heard about an arranged marriage in America? I mean, they do happen within certain cultures, but they are by far the minority. They are by far the most rare. For the most part, when we think of marriage in America, we think of a woman choosing a man or a man choosing a woman completely on their own, without much or little to no parental interference or selection. Now, omiai, or arranged marriage in Japan, hasn't been gone for very long. In fact, it still does exist. It still does happen. There actually are even companies that still exist that set up omiai. There are companies that go out and search for females who want to sign up to their database, or males that want to sign up to their database of selections for people who still wish to follow through with an omiai and go onto that website, select someone, and have the marriage arranged by that website. Now, it's a little bit different in the sense that the parents aren't arranging it anymore, but it's still arranged by someone else. It's someone finding one person, finding another person, saying, you two meet. And there's no initiative taken by either person to have to execute the start of a conversation or any sort of interaction, whether it be intimately driven or conversation driven or herbivore or carnivore driven. We've been doing this for a long time in America. We've been pretty much left to our own tools. We've been left to either as women come up and ask men out, or as men come up and ask women out. In Japan, a woman asking a man out is oftentimes very, very rare. It is far more likely to happen in America than it is to happen in Japan. The idea of woman taking control of a relationship from the very first initiation thereof is oftentimes still seen as very rare and kind of a little too bold for Japanese females. Now, this is just culturally. I'm not saying there's anything wrong or right about that. I'm not saying women should take more or shouldn't take more. I'm just saying culturally this is the situation. And this is also due to the fact that omiai is still not very... It hasn't been gone for very long. Still, even in the times of the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, omiai was still very popular. People were still doing arranged marriages. My own wife's parents were an arranged marriage, so it's only been one generation with her. She's her first generation to select who she marries by herself without her parents' influence. That's one generation separation. So that personally is what I see as part of something that should be taken into the analysis of why they're starting to be like, hey, there's herbivore and carnivore men and everything in between. Yes, they've always been there, they've always existed. When left to their own devices, there will be a type of man who is very laid back or conversation driven or herbivore, as the definition holds, and they're seeking of a female mate. And then there's the carnivore, who's overly aggressive sometimes, with only the sense of the intimate connection on their mind being the full drive for them. These have always existed, but they haven't actually gone into action, because before then, what was the point? Who they were going to marry, who they were going to even date before being married was completely set up by the parents. There wasn't casual dating in Japan before the arranged marriage happened. They would be told, this is a person who lives close to us, they come from a great family, we think they'll be perfect for you. When you're of the right age, you guys are going to get married. What's the point of pursuing other dates? What's the point of learning the tools to speak to the opposite sex when you already know who from the opposite sex you're going to marry? I'm really surprised this isn't taken into more account by Morioka in his study of this herbivore men. And the fact that he says, okay, I realize I can't just break it down into black and white, that all men aren't carnivore or herbivore in the way that they pursue women. He's like, I have to admit that there is all these subgenres, but that just makes it so complicated to define the herbivore and carnivore man. No, it doesn't make it complicated. It's what's always existed. There's always been extremes on each end and a huge gray area in between. There's men who are internally herbivore and externally carnivore in their pursuit of women. There is men that are both herbivore externally and internally. And there's everything in between, every combination in between. You could probably break that down into 8 different combinations if you think about it. And those exist because there isn't just these black and white labels that we can use, just these 2 labels to pursue the different types of ways men approach women. And I'm just going to say this is my own personal analysis of herbivore and carnivore men, but I also want to just throw in at the end of this my own observations of men in Japan pursuing women, and also some of the reasons you may see kind of an incline in the herbivore man, or we see this incline of men not outright pursuing marriage very quickly, or pursuing the start of a family or childbirth very quickly. Very quickly now we're seeing the Japanese government being like, it's these herbivore men that are destroying and making the population decline in Japan. No, it's not. It is not. I do not believe this is the situation. They're often saying, oh, they don't want to follow in their father's footsteps of just being a hardy salaryman and working 12 hours a day. Let's stop right there. 12 hours a day, you say? Maybe, just maybe, and I think we can see this pursued due to the fact that we have the word karoshi, death from overwork, in Japan. These people that are the next generation are finally starting to realize 12 hours is too fucking much to work. It's not supposed to be a natural amount of work for a human. It can literally lead to death from overwork. They had these fathers that were constantly absent from home. They had these fathers that had to work and work until they were absolutely exhausted, and when they finally did get home, the first thing they would do was just crash and go right to bed. Or they were called out to go to these nonkai parties, which are drinking parties with their bosses, because you can't refuse in Japan or you lose face, and they had no time with their families. Now these politicians and government officials are saying, well, I can't believe that these next generation doesn't want to pursue the same thing. Why can't you believe that? Why can't you see a generation that finally took a look at their absentee fathers, that took a look at their overworked and sometimes worked to death fathers, and don't want to pursue that miserable fucking life? Don't blame them. Blame your fucked up system of not regulating 8 hours of work. Regulate yourself in the sense that you're not working your people literally to death. It's my own personal belief that that's one of the main things making these quote-unquote herbivore men. They're saying also that the herbivore men, that it's not just the pursuit of women that they're kind of lackluster or kind of laid back with, but they're also laid back and lackluster with their pursuit of work, that they don't want to start this whole, I get a job, I get married, we start a family, I'm at work all day, you're the housewife all day. Yeah, no fucking kidding. Maybe they weren't happy with that life when they were a kid. Maybe they weren't happy with never seeing their father. Maybe they weren't happy with not seeing their mother get a chance to pursue her own career. A lot of time they talk about, oh yeah, these herbivore men want to see, equal rights for women. Yeah, of course they do. Women have been suppressed in Japan for way too long. You want to talk about glass ceilings? The glass ceilings in Japan are insane for women. The amount of pay that they get and equal level jobs is, it's absolutely absurd. Sometimes I think people make a point with feminism pushing too hard in America and it being too strong, but it hasn't even gotten close to being equal here in Japan as far as women's rights. And I'm not like a strong, let's support women's rights type of guy. I'm not like, feminism strong, strong side on that. I'm not taking up the feminism flag. I'm just saying women are most obviously downtrodden in Japan. Women CEOs almost don't exist entirely. Like, you could probably count them on one hand in Japan. I'm serious. The amount of women that are allowed to get to high-level positions is so rare that people from the UN who want to do different business surveys and studies with Japan refuse to, because they say until they see more women in higher-level jobs, that they just don't see a point of how they're equally on the same international level of a lot of other countries as far as what they allow women to do. And until they see that, they just don't want to even deal with a nation that doesn't want to be progressive. Oftentimes women politicians, recently there was one who was laughed out of Congress and just told to go home and make babies. Why aren't you home making babies and in the kitchen? That's what the congressman literally said to them. And afterwards he gave this absolutely atrocious apology. He was like, I didn't actually, mean that that's what she should do right now. I just thought, that's a woman's place. He didn't even actually say, I'm sorry, that was fucked up. Every woman has just as much right to be in Congress as a man, and, their opinions can matter here in Congress too. It's a really fucked up situation. Once again, I'm not pushing strong feminist, women's rights. I would like to see them equal, though, in Japan. There's so many insane laws. For example, here's another one. If you want to adopt a kid in Japan, if the woman is not a housewife, then you can't adopt a kid in Japan. If both people in a family, if there's a husband and a wife and they both work jobs, even if both work part-time jobs, it is against the law for them to adopt a child. The Japanese government just believes it is impossible for you to both work a job and raise a child. Why would we let you adopt one? Yet here my wife and I are working more than 40 hours a week raising 2 kids. So tell me how that's not possible, Japanese government. Tell me, please. So I see a lot of suppression by the Japanese government. I see a lot of overwork by Japanese corporations creating these herbivore men, creating these men who don't want to pursue their father's footsteps of being worked nearly to death. Again, this is just my own opinion, and there's no empirical evidence to back up anything I'm saying, but at the same time, there's no empirical evidence to back up any of the studies that Masahiro Morioka supposedly followed through with, and then started these definitions and then divided them into sub-8 groups, and then said, well, yeah, of course there's this gray area and there's this black and white. And I also just want to ask, of course, I don't believe Masahiro Morioka is watching any of my videos, that's for sure, but when was the last time that guy was in the dating scene? I mean, really, when's the last time he tried to date women, we're talking about an older professor here who hasn't been in the dating scene for ages. His analysis is great, and he can interview a lot of people, he can talk to a lot of people, but when was the last time he got his own first-hand evidence? Yeah, that's my overall opinion on the whole herbivore carnivore, my analysis of it from what I see from within Japan, and just my own take on it. Of course, I always want to hear you guys' take on it, especially those of you also living in Japan with me. You guys always have some very interesting information, sometimes things I've totally overlooked. I'm always open to the ideas of being interested in new information and have my eyes open to new information. Please feel free to share anything with me that, even if it totally, completely goes against what I'm saying in this video, you're like, no, Scott, you're totally wrong. I still want to see it. Please send me links, send me videos. I'm always interested in learning more. Until next time, guys, this was JFAC. I am Unrested. If you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, and subscribe.